Oh shit. Comic Cuck's making another video about SJW Marvel. Unsubscribe. Hello and welcome to Bobby Drake, where I talk about Iceman and my name is Drake. Iceman is a founding member of the X-Men, an Omega-level mutant, and one of the most famous characters in the entire X-Men mythos. He's a lovable, wisecracking goofball, and he was a complete ladies' man. And this is one of the many reasons why it came as a massive shock to some people that he's gay. So this is naturally going to be a contentious topic, but I'd like to give my 2 cents and discuss where I fall on this issue. I guess let's just go. I want to get this out of the way first and foremost so there is no confusion. Along with the rest of the original X-Men, Iceman made his first appearance in X-Men #1 in 1963. The reveal that he's gay, on the other hand, came from all new X-Men #40 in 2015, over 50 years later. I am by no means saying that Bobby Drake was conceived as a homosexual character, or that every writer that has touched the X-Men wrote Iceman as a closeted gay man. I am not the writer, so I don't know for sure, but I think most of us agree that would be highly improbable, and frankly, would be ridiculous to think. Second of all, I believe that the reveal was bad. Really bad and super poorly handled. In fact, if the reveal wasn't done like this, I don't think that this page would have gone down in infamy and the backlash wouldn't have been nearly as bad. But hey, at least we got this super memeable Jean Grey face out of it. Don't worry, for those of you that haven't read the book and don't have context, we're going to touch back on this later. The third thing is that I am not a comic book reviewer. While I will give my opinions on smaller beats like the point mentioned earlier, I'm not here to speak about the overall quality of the writing in these books because that is 100% up to your own personal opinion, and your mileage might vary. Okay, so let's jump into the nitty-gritty. In the X-Men series, Cyclops fell into more of a villain/anti-hero role, and Beast thought that he was moving away from the ideals of Professor Xavier. In an attempt to show him how far that he had strayed, Beast went back in time, gathered the original team of X-Men from when they first formed, and brought them into the future so they could have a talk with their fallen leader. Well, this ended up not working out, and the young X-Men ended up not being able to return to the past because of time travel shenanigans. In the aforementioned all-new X-Men #40, young Jean Grey confronts young Iceman about him being gay since she read his mind. You have to remember that as an Omega-level telepath, she is extremely skilled at mind reading, and sometimes glimpses hidden away thoughts without meaning to. That is what led us to this extremely awkward reveal. At first, Bobby wouldn't admit to being gay, but after knowing that he couldn't hide it from her, he came out. The dialogue is really clunky, and the jokes are, in my opinion, in poor taste. Following that reveal, the young Jean and Bobby talk to the older Iceman to see what's up in Uncanny X-Men #600, where it's revealed that, yeah, the current Iceman is gay too. That makes sense considering that the young X-Men are literally the same people as their older counterparts, despite making significant changes post-time travel. So, in continuity, why did the older Iceman stay in the closet? Well, you have to remember that in the Marvel universe, mutants are largely hated and persecuted despite their amazing powers, and being a proud mutant already puts enough of a target on Bobby's back. Iceman didn't want to live outside of the closet and double down on that hatred, wanting a part of his life that he wasn't actively persecuted for. As time went on, he buried that part of himself so deep within that it became easier and easier to repress. If we look to the real world, there are many homosexuals who don't want to admit to themselves who they are. After all, not many people actively want to be in a group that is heavily marginalized, especially if it's something that isn't super noticeable on the surface with something like gender or skin color. Hell, there's been documentation of homosexuality throughout all of history, and in some cases, people hid who they were out of fear of literally being hunted down and killed, something not too far off from the Sentinels of X-Men lore. Also, current Bobby was absolutely not ready to come out of the closet, but the younger him sort of forced his hand. In fact, we get to see in Iceman Volume 3 #11 how he reacted to his younger self being outed when nobody was around. Granted, this came out years after the original reveal, but it does show that he was not happy about being outed like this. You have to remember that the original X-Men are characters from the 60s. Granted though, that's kind of in flux because of how Marvel handles their sliding timescale. Regardless, there's no doubt that young Iceman was transported to a time period where the LGBT community is a lot more accepted, and that alone makes for a pretty good reason why he is more able to admit his identity to himself. I think that's a pretty comprehensive look into the in-continuity explanation and character development content, but let's turn to some of the criticism. For full disclosure, I want to clarify that I'm a straight guy. Well, maybe like 90% straight because handsome men like Jason Momoa and Michael B. Jordan exist, and you have to be pretty blind to not appreciate that those are some good-looking dudes. However, while I'm not a member of the LGBT community, I have several close friends and family members that are, and I've spoken to them in great detail about their experiences and thought processes. I am by no means saying that the people I've spoken to are representative of the LGBT community as a whole, but I want to do my best to explain my point of view from the working knowledge that I have to go on. One of the main criticisms leveled against Iceman's coming out is that it felt forced. I stated earlier that the reveal was pretty poorly handled in my personal opinion, but while there were hints/offhand remarks about Bobby being in the closet and other prior series for decades, more on that later, this reveal would have more gravitas if it was something more built up to regarding young Iceman, and it would feel more earned as opposed to more or less coming out of left field. I totally understand where people are coming from when they say that it feels forced, but for me, that doesn't make this story beat inherently bad in and of itself. Common criticism number 2 is that Bobby being gay is out of character since he was a notorious womanizer. I wouldn't agree, since it's pretty common for closeted homosexuals to have been in heterosexual relationships in the past. In fact, there are instances of some people literally getting married and having children before coming to terms with their sexuality. I can understand if that doesn't make sense from an outsider's perspective, which is totally fine. The point is, though, it does actually happen. Now, while I said at the top of the video that I think it would be highly improbable for Iceman to have always been written as a closeted gay man, there have been hints at it over the years, which was actually noted by the writer of the reveal, Brian Michael Bendis. One of the most overt examples is this scene where Bobby pretended to be Angel's boyfriend as a joke. I mean, yeah, it's a joke, but it's a little coincidental that following the reveal of young Iceman being gay, both versions of Bobby immediately make remarks about how hot Angel is. It's also worth noting that in the very next issue after the gay joke, Bobby starts flirting with one of his teammates, Cloud, a character that he would sort of date that is both a man and a woman. While Iceman ends up breaking things off of Cloud since he couldn't handle her dual sexes, I think this is still worth noting if we're looking at previous signs. Outside of Cloud, a lot of the bits that people tend to point out regarding Bobby being closeted over the years are, in my opinion, vague enough that you can see whatever you want in them. But how could we overlook that mutant coming out scene in X2?
When did you first know you were
a mutant?
It's just, this mutant problem is a little...
What mutant problem?
Have you tried not being a mutant?
Clearly, this is allegory for mutants being a stand-in for homosexuals, which admittedly is nothing new. After all, the X-Men have always been a stand-in for minority groups as a whole, and yes, this is an alternate universe, so these are alternate characters, but it just strikes me as an interesting choice that it's Iceman of all people that's given the scene out of all the X-Men movie characters. There's also some critics of Bobby coming out as gay that say it would make more sense if he was bisexual. Personally, I feel that writing him as bi doesn't work if that's not what his character is. While not everybody feels the same, I personally subscribe to the mindset that sexual orientation isn't a choice. Bisexual people exist, and homosexual people exist. Now, being bisexual has its own hurdles unique from the other letters in the LGBT acronym, since many bisexual people experience hate from inside the LGBT community. And I feel that this isn't often explored in media, and it would be very fascinating to see here, especially if it was being tackled by a well-known character like Iceman. So while I think that that would be a more interesting topic than what we currently have, it doesn't change the fact that in canon, Iceman is gay, and since that's what he is, that's what we should focus on when we're looking at the narrative. In regards to Iceman's recent solo series, there's been some complaints about how it almost exclusively focuses on Bobby exploring his sexuality. That's also up to personal taste, but I completely understand that being Bobby's focus in life if he was a real person. He lived a life well into his 30s, not allowing himself to experience a significant part of who he was, so of course he'd want to focus on it. Maybe I just relate to it more since I absolutely hate being single, and when I'm out of a relationship, I can be obnoxious to be around, since going out and meeting women is basically the only thing on my mind. A book that's mostly about Bobby using dating apps and going on dates is pretty damn relatable to my own life, and I also adore comics that dive into interpersonal relationships and interactions just as much as I enjoy action. Besides, how many Spider-Man storylines focus on Peter Parker actively pursuing love interests and villains kind of acting like background characters? Now, I've seen some people hate the change in Iceman's sexuality so much that they're demanding that Marvel change it back. That would be extremely tacky. Sure, it could be done, but it is way harder to write a compelling "I thought I might be gay but I'm actually not" story over a compelling "I've been lying to myself since I didn't want to be further demonized, considering I already had to deal with the persecution of being a mutant" story. The whole point of fiction is to experience stepping into someone else's world, even if their experiences are alien to the reader. Because of this, I'm actually kind of glad that the Iceman solo book seems to have made some readers a bit uncomfortable, since it is clearly exposing people to new ideas and helping paint a better understanding of what other people go through while being written in a realistic and respectful manner at the same time, something I think can be chalked up to it being written by Sienna Grace, an openly gay man. At the end of the day, if you absolutely can't stand reading a book starring a homosexual lead character, or if Iceman is somehow ruined for you because of his sexuality, then you don't have to read the books. Not everything is going to appeal to everyone, and that's okay. People like what they like, and in theory, there shouldn't be anything wrong with that. I'm not looking to change anyone's mind, or say that people have to like a book that they clearly don't. I just want to provide context where I can. This is the kind of healthy conversation that I want from the comic book community, and one that I think it would benefit a lot from. Something that's a bit more open-minded, respectful, and at the very least, a community that's willing to agree to disagree. If you're new to my channel, then this is not my normal type of content. I mostly try to stick to doing strictly lore-based videos. However, every so often I want to give my opinion on topics like this, since I have a little bit of a unique perspective in that I actively keep up with comic books on a week-to-week basis, and I like to think that I am pretty versed in lore, so I can give a little bit more of a historical perspective on things. However, if you don't agree with my opinion on things, then there's a good chance that you might find like 95% of my content a lot more refreshing and up your alley. So if you at least enjoyed the quality of the editing, the storytelling, and the historical aspect, maybe you might want to give those a look. And if you're interested in where that live action bit earlier in the video is from, it's actually from a video I did on the Marvel Swimsuit Special series. There's actually 4 of these, and I go into pretty interesting detail. It's a nice little tidbit of Marvel history that isn't often talked about. So if you like this, maybe you'll like that. Anyway, I hope you learned at least a little something new, and maybe I'll see you next time.